Happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. We are doing 28 Days of Love, and today is day 20. I am your host, Melissa Forziat. I'm a keynote speaker. And when I speak, my topic is Take the Doughnut. It's another way to say Carpe Diem. And it comes from this weird thing that happened in college. I left an actual donut on a table, and it became an object lesson for me and what it looks like to leave an opportunity behind. So I don't want to do that anymore. I want to take the donut. Now, from time to time, I'll give myself a take the donut challenge. I'll say there's something that I want to do. I'll make it official so I can hold myself accountable to it. But this time, I'm opening it up to anybody who wants to join. So here we are. We're doing 28 Days of Love. Again, it's day 20, and I'm sharing 10 things I love about the movie Pretty Woman, and I am not doing it alone. Back for another bit of film coverage here is Danielle Turchiano, who is a former journalist and host of the Made Possible by Pop Culture podcast. Welcome back, Danielle.
Thank you. I'm excited to be at kind of at the beginning and kind of at the end of the month. I feel like it's nice, well-rounded.
It's so good. For those who don't remember or who haven't seen it yet, go back, check out day 3. We talked about Notting Hill because we're doing all Julia Roberts is what we're doing here with Danielle. I wanted to ask, first of all, tell us a little bit more about yourself and tell us a bit about your background with Pretty Woman.
Well, first I want to say, I said this the last time, you kind of nail the intro very easily for me. Like that is all it, really. Like I was an entertainment journalist for about 15 years. Currently, I'm not doing that job. I am freelancing in like PR and marketing spaces, but I'm hosting a podcast where I invite guests to come and share stories from pop culture that is influencing their lives and careers. And so seasons 1 and 2 are available now everywhere, wherever podcasts are, and on YouTube. And then season 3 got pushed a little bit this year because of the wildfires here, but that's coming very soon.
Okay, so there's that. And then Pretty
Yeah,
Woman.
I was
Mhm.
gonna say, and then Pretty Woman, I didn't see this movie until I was in high school, I think. Like not it came out in 1990 and I was not allowed to see it because I was too young and my parents were a little strict about what I watched anyway. So I came to it later than like the phenomenon that it was, perhaps. So it was already, home video situation. I don't remember the first time I saw it. But I do remember that even though I was older, it was still kind of controversial. Like my parents were still like unsure if I should see it. I don't think they even knew I ended up seeing it. I think I either rented it by myself or I saw it at a friend's house. I can't fully remember, but they were very concerned about just the general like log line of the movie, the fact that a main character was a sex worker. They were concerned about like how much is going to be in this movie and like how adult are the themes because they just did not want me watching any of that content, which I think I do understand looking back because the character is a main character and it is a rom-com. So yes, there's going to be some intimacy, but I also have to kind of raise an eyebrow to it because I'm like, it's a major motion picture. It was not rated NC-17. It's not porn. Like
Mhm.
at a certain point, like you're censoring good stories that deserve to be told, and sex worker stories deserve to be told. And not that this is based on a real person. It's very over the top in like a magical way, I would argue, but it was always something that like was kind of a point of contention once I actually saw it. I was like, there's no reason this movie should have been censored. Certainly when I was 6 and it first came out in 1990, fine. But that's true of anything that's PG-13 and above.
It's so interesting. Let me give a quick background on this film. So again, you said it came out in 1990, directed by Gary Marshall, written by J.F. Lawton. I'm going to name a bunch of people who were in this film. So it stars Richard Gere as Edward Lewis, Julia Roberts as Vivian Ward, Jason Alexander as Philip Stuckey, Laura San Giacomo as Kit DeLuca, Ralph Bellamy as David Morse, and Hector Elizondo as Barney Thompson. There are certainly more people, or Barnard Thompson, I should say. There's certainly more people, but those felt like some names that really needed to be mentioned here up front. And I just wanted to take off a little bit on what you were saying there because my understanding, I've heard Julia Roberts say that the initial script for this was a lot more hardcore in early development stages, and then it got developed way out of that and, bought
But
by, like much more wholesome company and turned out to be the film that we know it now to be. So I think and I think Gary Marshall probably had a lot to do with that as well. So I think what we have now, I think you know, it's almost hard to find the things that are too much in this film in a
Mhm.
way. They show it in a way that I think is tasteful. So it's and maybe not family friendly, but much closer to that than you might think by reading the log line. So I love that you mentioned that, and
Yeah, and
don't judge a
I will
book by
say
its
my parents
cover.
didn't know any of that. They were strictly
Yeah.
basing it off of like the poster and the trailer, like even, the ripped fishnets and the white outfit that the white bodysuit that she wears, they were like, no, that's too much for you. And I was like, I don't want to watch this for nudity. That's
Mhm.
not the point here. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, so how are we going to talk about this film, you may be asking? We're not going scene by scene. What we are going to do is we're sharing the top 10 things we love about this film. I'm going to take the even numbers. Danielle will take the odd numbers. I'm going to start off with number 10. And look, we may mix between things that are really specific and things that are much broader, but it's just things that bring us joy. So for me, number 10, Vivian's habit of sitting awkwardly in places. It's so good. It was clearly like a character choice for Julia Roberts that she's either having her sit awkwardly or having her sit on awkward things, always. And when she's in her world, she doesn't really do that because she's more comfortable. But she's either fidgeting or she's like trying to lean on something or she's sitting down, and it's happening all the time when she's in Edward's world, which is most of the time in this film. So it's something that I think allows us to be drawn to this character because you can feel connected to how uncomfortable and how out of her element she is. And it maybe reminds you of when you felt like that. So whether or not you relate to what this character does for a living, you can relate to how she feels being in a setting that isn't normal for her. So I just love that choice. It really put me right there very quickly with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I do like that it speaks a lot to her comfort level. And I mean, you called that out perfectly, I think, just in terms of like you already know so much about how she feels just by looking at her in her environment.
Yeah. So it's a small thing, but it happens throughout the film. So it ends up becoming kind of a motif. So that's my number 10. What do you have for number 9?
I actually picked the intro to her character. It's kind of a montage right at the start of the film, and it's very much just like she's getting ready for her night at work, which is working Hollywood Boulevard, and like she has a terrible wig. She's using like black marker to fill in like the rips on the boots. She's going downstairs and she sees her landlord, who, by the way, can't remember the actor's real name, but he played Mr. Heckles on Friends, which also really tickled me because by the time I saw this movie, I was already a huge Friends fan. I know this came first, but and she's hiding from him who's looking for because he's looking for rent. And so it's a very like get to know her quickly, ease into her world way of meeting a character. But I also the one of the reasons I like it so much is because I feel like in a lot of films where there are sex worker characters, you don't really get to know their inner worlds or their personal home lives at all. And you do hear right from the start, this movie is telling you like this is this woman's story. Obviously, the title is also telling you that, but you had spent time already with Richard Gere's character, and I thought it was a really smart choice to be like, no, don't worry, like he's not the main focal point. We're going to get to know her. She's a fully fleshed out, well-rounded human being. And I also just honestly picked it. The filling in the boot was like such a specific detail of like who this woman is, and yes, it speaks to like I don't have any money, but it also speaks to like so many people have had to do things like that. It felt so relatable, even though I feel like the majority of that audience can't imagine what she does for work. They would never see themselves doing that. But that little detail, oh, I did that too, makes it okay to identify with her.
I love that detail. Yeah, there's so many things. It's like she's just a normal person, hiding her head under a pillow, not wanting to turn off the alarm clock, feeling,
Right.
like it's
All of those things.
all the
Yeah.
things. Yeah, it's so good. Well, I think part of building out that world leads me to number 8. Kit's a good friend. I really like this relationship with Kit. We see it throughout the film. I like it on a lot of levels, but what I really love is um, the very end of the film, where we see this beautiful moment of vulnerability from Kit when Vivian is saying to her, this is the Edward Lewis Scholarship Fund. We think you've got a lot of potential, Kit DeLuca. That look in Laura's eyes, like, you do? You think I've got potential? And it's just like that right there. That exchange is something I felt for the whole film, and they articulate it for me at the end, but I always knew it was there, that there's this, like, who's mentoring whom. They're both special people, and this happened to happen for Vivian, but there's also something in Kit, and they're both different from everybody around them in some way. And
Yeah.
I like that Vivian, now finding a way to kind of lift herself out of her situation, is giving Kit this potential to explore what she wants in a way that she might have pushed aside. It was still in her head, but she wasn't really giving it time and space. I just love this friendship, and I love that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I will say I also loved, and it's earlier in the film, but she makes kind of a joke about like, oh, I gave this one to you. Like this could have been me. And it wasn't said with any bitterness because it was true. Like when he pulls up in that Lotus, Kit is like, go get him. When they're both working the street, like they mark this turf, but they're sharing the turf that they're marking. They're marking it from someone else who doesn't work with them. And there was no like resentment, like, oh, this should have been me.
Hmm. Yeah, so beautiful. Okay, so that's number 8. What do you have for number 7?
I did have the scene after she gets in the car, when he first pulls up and he clearly cannot drive stick, which I found highly amusing. But the reason that I actually picked the scene where she gets in the car and she tells him, I can tell you how to go to Beverly Hills. I picked it for a couple of very specific to me reasons in the sense of I already set this up as like I wasn't supposed to see this movie because my parents wanted to censor me from what they thought was going to be a lot of sex. But what they didn't censor me from growing up was I used to read a lot of true crime books. So I knew going into this movie, it's a rom-com, but everything in my brain watching the scene was like, oh, this is a true crime story waiting to happen. Like you don't get into a strange man's car. And then he also doesn't know her. Like she could have a gun in her purse. Like now he's letting her drive. She could rob him. She could take him to a bad area of town and strand him there. But no, it's a rom-com. So there's like a gentle optimism in the scene that like really touched me in the we're both in kind of a weird place. We both kind of need the other one for this odd task. And we're getting to know each other on a very special level while we're doing it because she's talking about how she grew up. I'm sure she never tells anybody that she works for how she grew up, but that leads him to getting out of the car and letting her drive because she knows how to handle a stick shift. Nobody gets robbed, nobody gets ripped off, nobody gets murdered. Like she actually delivers him to the hotel where he's supposed to go, and then she's willing to take a bus back. Doesn't even ask him for extra money for bus fare, and he's like, "No, just come in." There's something I always love about movies where like characters get to know each other in cars. And I just think this one does it really well because it's not just it's character building, but it's also like plot point driven. Um, and it's just very like wholesome and sweet.
I love that. And also we get so much information about these characters. Like, both in the dialogue and like the fact that Vivian like, do we need to know that your foot is as long as your arm from your elbow to your wrist? No, but what we love about it is that Vivian goes to trivia. Like she's got these weird facts.
Yeah.
You know, for Edward, it's the most natural thing in the world for him to let her drive because he has like, when does he ever drive?
And it's not
Um,
even his car. So like, who cares if we ruin Stucky's car? He's a terrible person.
Yeah, so it is. We get so much good information about them and what they choose to say and
Yeah.
how they're behaving. Yeah, there's something really natural about this scene, even as contrived as the circumstance is.
Right.
So good. Okay, number six. A lot of mine, I picked characters that aren't necessarily the lead characters because I feel like there's a lot of cool stuff happening with some of these side characters. This is Ralph Bellamy's last role. Um, so I absolutely wanted to bring that up here. If you love this movie and you haven't seen other work of his, go check IMDb and be amazed at the length. Um, so I wanted to bring up something with him. Uh, I love the interplay with Vivian and his character David at that dinner scene. Um, actually, I love all the interplay with all the characters. I think there's an incredible generosity happening between every single person at that table outside of the business talk. It's this really interesting layered scene where it's like there's the business, which is kind of cutthroat, and then there's the meal, which is a great forgiveness and generosity between everybody and a humility and a kind of rolling with the punches sort of a thing. The moment when Vivian picks up that, was it like pate, like foie gras or whatever,
Yeah.
on like a piece of bread, and she just doesn't even know how to use utensils with this. And you just get this old senior man who's like the most senior person at the table who's just like, I'm gonna just pick it up and eat it because I see you're struggling. Like, and no words need to be spoken about why she's struggling. Just that moment of great generosity and that kind of connection between the two of them. And you see that happening throughout the dinner. But I love that particular moment of her just being like, okay, I'm going to pick it up. She's going to brush it off a little bit. She's going to eat it and it's all going to be good because he did it too. He normalized this behavior and now we're all set. So, yeah, I had to bring that one in here.
Yeah. And to be fair, it is weird that the salad course was last. I didn't understand that either. I was like, that's maybe it was a thing that fancy restaurants did back then. I've never encountered that personally. So I don't know what that was about.
What a high degree of difficulty meal this ended up being for her. Could could Edward not have like curated this a little? What a setup for failure. But here we are. It's a lovable scene. Um, but yeah, so that's number six for me. Number five for you though
I mean,
is
I did kind of lean more on like the obvious moments, I think, but I just love them. And one for me was she's walking down the street in Beverly Hills, and it happens more than once, but I love the juxtaposition of the two different scenes. The first time she's obviously like still in her, I don't want to say walk of shame because I don't believe in that, but also like that's not really true of the profession. It's just she's in the white outfit, the white like bodysuit from the night before, and like no, everyone's turning their heads and looking at her, but like with derision because we're all judgmental and you're in a ritzy neighborhood. But then the second time when she's fully dressed out of that like boutique, I think she's wearing a more ridiculous outfit, quite frankly. It was maybe high fashion of the 90s, but I would never, like the hat alone was like, are you going to the Derby? What's happening? But she's like now fitting in with the neighborhood and everybody is turning their heads, but it's because they're like, oh, who is she? She's like an attractive woman. She's very high fashion. She's very well dressed, well put together. So it's the same kind of behavior, but with different emotion behind it. And I really enjoyed that seeing them take the time to in what many movies would consider like a filler scene, but you can say so much about the surroundings, but also about her and the way that she's carrying herself. Because there are moments where she like will pull a jacket tighter around her when she's in her normal streetwear because she knows like, oh, they're not going to accept me here like this. But then when she comes out of the boutique and she's got all the bags, she also knows like, all right, I look good, I feel good, I fit in. And I kind of love that we're seeing her evolve in the I'm more comfortable in these new surroundings. And yeah, it is a little bit for some superficial reasons, but it's not entirely like Edward's accepting her. He's giving her the money. He's helping her like better her life in different ways. And so she's internalizing all of that.
Mm. And I think it speaks to how much does it really take to get comfortable in an environment? We've all been new in somewhere, in some aspect of our lives, to a place, to an experience, to a person. Like we've all had that feeling of being out of our element and being new, and then at some point down the road, being able to say, "No, this is now my comfort zone." And like, how long does it really take to get there? And I think we've been able to see her process, and to be able to mark the evolution by these moments, by these before and after moments, whatever that might look like. A perfect example of that for sure. Okay. Number four. If there is one moment in this movie that is always going to make me go, "Aw," it's this moment with Hector Elizondo. Barnard starts out, he doesn't want this person in his hotel. He calls her into his office. She's just unloading on him. She's like, "Fine, call the cops, whatever." She's like, "Nobody's gonna help me here." Like, he picks up the phone and he makes a call to Bridget in women's clothing. And my heart grows three sizes. Like, I don't know a thing about Barnard's backstory, and I feel like I know everything about Barnard's backstory. Between that moment and the moment he tries to give Edward his card the first time, he's like, "Bernard Thompson, manager of the hotel." Like, and he's just gone. And you can feel something underneath those moments that makes me feel like he kind of knows Vivian. Like, where he might not, like, he's worked his way up in this world
Right.
as far as I can tell. And he wants to like Vivian, he wants to help Vivian, and he sees the thing in Vivian that we all see in her. And just, she thinks he's calling the cops to get her out of his hotel, and he's getting her help that she desperately needs, in that, like, the exact specific kind of help she needs right then. I just can't even talk about it without like feeling it. It's so good.
However, I agree with you. But however, that upset me then when they do the big shopping spree that they don't just go back to Bridget, that they go to
Oh,
the other boutique and they clearly spend a ton more money because she only bought the one dress the first time, which she probably didn't know she was allowed to buy more. And they don't give Bridget the commission. They don't give the terrible people the commission either. But, I did kind of wish like, oh, you should have paid it forward in a way. Like go back to Bridget. She was nice to you the first time.
that's true. Maybe that's Pretty Woman too. Maybe they go back to Bridget. I don't know what the plot of that film is, but
It's just the
anyway,
whole
they have
plot.
to go
It's
back
like,
to
here's your
Bridget.
money. You can buy
It's so true. Uh I'm still healing from talking about that scene. Okay.
it.
That was my number four. What is your number three?
Well, for anybody who did listen to the previous time I was on Rom-Com Month and we talked about Notting Hill, I did talk a lot about how I love things that are about the entertainment industry. And I will add, I also love things that are like set in LA and like show off LA. And so I did want to call that out here in this movie because obviously like there are very different sides of LA shown. There's the ritzy side of Beverly Hills and where they're staying in the hotel. And then there's the Walk of Fame where they're working as sex workers. And one of the things, this is so specific and granular, but one of the things that I loved was how they mark their turf by using the Walk of Fame stars. Like we work from this person to this person, you can have that person to that. Like that to me was so unique in a weird way. Like, yeah, we all know they have certain areas that they're allowed to work, but being able to call out this not by corner, but by star to star says so much about LA too. Like you think you're coming out here for these big dreams and to become rich and famous. Maybe you achieved some of that because now you have a star in Hollywood Boulevard, but look at how it's being used. Like there's just so much to unpack in that little thing. And then there are other moments like that throughout the movie where you see the dichotomy of neighborhoods. Like there's a guy driving by in a convertible and his like son, I think, is too young, but sitting in the front seat, like, and they're both on little cell phones. And I'm like, the city is ridiculous, and this movie is pointing it out.
Hmm. Yeah, it's absolutely LA is a character in this film, and so many parts like over it on the street, like
Hmm.
it's shown from all these different interesting angles. And I mean, aside from a moment where they go to San Francisco, I feel like
Sure.
that it's this real, like, it is the film. It's just baked in all the different ways it can be. It's so good.
Yeah, and like thematically, it feels like something that could only happen here. Like everyone comes out here to chase these big dreams, and like you don't come out here to be a sex worker, but if you were to believe that this is the place where you could be plucked from that into a world of like opulence, like where else? Not New York, I'll tell you that. Like where else could this happen?
Yeah. Oh wow. Perfectly set here. Okay. Number two, I'm actually going to talk about both Edward and Vivian in this one. So they go to La Traviata, they go to the opera. Um, and the thing that I love, I mean, it's such a cool scene in terms of all the reactions we get, the clips of the opera, like all these great moments. But I think that the detail about it that I love the most, she's watching the opera and he's watching her.
Mhm.
And something about that, like, there's this fascination. They're both, not that he didn't discover it before with her, but I think they're appreciating these things in a new way in that moment. And I think you're meant to be sort of looking at Julia Roberts. Uh, but if you start looking at what's happening with Edward, he's like, wow, what is happening with me? Because he's not in this for a romantic entanglement, and it's becoming a factor now. And like, just oh, it's just so beautiful that just like, here's where your focus is and here's where your focus is, and we get to decide what we're looking at in this scene. So I have to call that one out. And I'm really glad that they got, I don't know how you get rights to an opera necessarily, but I love that they were able to get all of that included here, because I can't imagine this movie without the scene.
Yeah, I mean, you could do it with something else, but it wouldn't have the same impact.
Mm.
Like movie is not the same thing. Like there's a certain there's sort of certain level of culture that he's giving her the opportunity to experience that doesn't like feel the same if they're just in a great movie together and he's watching her experience it as she's watching the screen. Like no one cares about that.
And it speaks a bit to what you were saying earlier too, because I think it's like really the first time we've seen her in his world in a new thing for the first time and loving it immediately.
Mm.
Like, most of the time she's put in a new situation, she's like, I
Well,
don't.
the opera glasses, she did struggle with the opera glasses for a second.
She did, but I didn't feel, it was funny. I
Yeah,
didn't feel that she felt self-conscious about
right.
it. I felt like it was just like, I don't know how these things work. And he was like, they work like this. But in other scenes, you can
Yes.
feel a physical discomfort from her that I think the second the opera starts, she leans all the way
Mhm.
in a way that she wasn't able to embrace other things so quickly. I think she's like building a muscle of like learning how to more quickly adapt in his world. And this is like, she was just right there almost instantly. So I think this plays on a few different levels.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because they say it in the film too, like it's the music. Like you don't need to speak Italian. Like you're going to be encaptured by the music, and that's what happens ultimately.
Yeah. Okay, so here we are. We've been working on a top 10 list, so we still have one more to go. What did you want to bring in for your last one for
I
number
mean,
one
it
here?
feels so basic saying this, but I do want to talk about the end where he climbs the fire escape because in so many rom-coms, the big gesture comes after an argument. And it's kind of like a last resort to win someone back. And like they didn't technically have an argument. Like she did reject his proposal, but it wasn't in a necessarily a negative yelling sort of traditional rom-com argument way. It was very much like she knows her worth and she knows what she wants out of life, and it's not to be at someone's beck and call. And he realizes, oh, I don't actually want someone at my beck and call anymore either. Um, and so, he gets in his limousine and he drives to her building, and like he doesn't even think about it. He just climbs the fire escape when he's been afraid of heights this whole time. And so it felt very much like the first thought on his mind is making her happy and making things right with her, and less about like what the gesture necessarily, like we as the audience know what the gesture means coming from him because of the fear of heights, but like he's not looking at it that way. He doesn't even really hesitate before he just gets up there. And what I thought was really also interesting about it was there was at least one, I think maybe two or even three times earlier in the movie where Stuckey says things like, I don't want you going to things alone, to his character, to Richard Gere's character. And to me, that was like kind of an interesting flip on like a lot of the expectations. So many times, like women have to have the escort on their arm for certain events. And in this way, like overall in the movie, it's a flip. Like he's hiring her to be his escort, etc. But at the end of this movie, when he makes this decision, it feels like he's making the decision of like, I don't want to go to things alone. And it's not just a transaction. It's like, I actually want to share my life with someone. And so to me, like that's why I feel like the ending works so well on the grand scale of like these types of movies and the dramatic gestures that are put forth within that we all grew up on a variety of different ones. Um, and to me, this one might feel a little smaller than some of the other ones, but I feel like it means more given where they were in the relationship because it wasn't like I'm trying to take your mind off of what came before it with something grand that will distract you. It's more of just, I felt like a natural next, I don't know, like a natural like step towards like, I just want to have a normal relationship.
Mm. They do a really good job in this film of showing us the progression of these characters to get where they get in the end. Because I think about, like, for Edward in particular, I think about that little moment of a scene where they have him barefoot and alone,
Oh
barefoot in the
yeah.
grass, just trying it on for size. He's not there with
Yeah.
Vivian. He's like, do I like this? I'm doing it. Like, he's like, is this a thing that I want to do more of? Without like it's the influence of Vivian, and he's just checking if he likes this.
Yes.
And I think that you can kind of see him doing this throughout the film in both moments with her and without her. So
Mhm.
it's nice to like that they both in a film that, none of these films have like a 4 hour runtime, 3 hour runtime. And yet somehow I feel like in this film, they give you those moments to show you that they're doing some work
Mm.
to get to their end version.
Yeah.
Um, so I think it makes the final scene feel much more earned
Yeah.
when
I
it's
mean, because they've
like,
also talked so much about that story that she told about like it was like a fairy tale of like the princess and the tower. Like, because he easily could have just when he bought the flowers on the other side of the building, walked up the steps. But that's not what he did because he knew what the story meant.
and I like that they kind of were a little on the nose. It's like he comes up on his white horse, his
Oh
white limo,
yeah,
and he draws his sword. He's got his umbrella and his flowers. Like they got as close as they could to the fairy
right.
tale.
That's true.
It's well chosen.
Yeah. And
Oh
it
my
also,
goodness.
I will say, it's given every Hollywood tour a quintessential stop. Like every bus tour you take goes by that building, points out that fire escape. They don't let you get out of the car and try to recreate anything. But like it's a hot spot photo destination and it has been for years. And like I think rightly so. I feel like this, like I said, this movie feels the ending feels realistic to me and like as you said, feels earned.
Yeah. Well, that's our list of 10 things that we love about Pretty Woman. The question for all of you watching is, what do you love about this film? I'm sure there's a lot of things we missed. I think we both had honorable mentions that we had some extras in case we had overlap. So tell us in the comments, what do you love about Pretty Woman? We'd love to hear from you on this. Before we close out today, Danielle, anything that you wanted to tease coming up for you? Any other things you wanted to plug?
No, I mean, just the reminder that my podcast, season three, will be coming soon. Seasons one and two are available now. My dog's Instagram is the thing that I always love to plug if everybody loves little furry dogs. It's Instagram at the real Mr. Archie. I post more on his than on any of my own social platforms, and arguably more than the podcast. So hopefully there will be news on the podcast soon. I just don't have it today.
Okay, that seems fair to me. And next time, if you're all in on Rom-Com Month, here's what you can expect next time. It's going to be day 21, and we're gonna watch Can't Buy Me Love from 1987. It's got Patrick Dempsey, it's got Amanda Peterson, it's got Courtney Gaines, Tina Kasparian, Seth Green. Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. So be sure to join me for that. And in the meantime, happy Rom-Com Month, everybody. Get love, get donuts. Bye.